Okay, we are here with Marshfield Mayor Bob McManus and City Administrator Steve Barg. There was a council meeting this past Tuesday, what was it, 9th, I guess, of July. There were a couple of technology-related things that, Mayor, I want to get your take on as far as City Council and meetings. One had to do with cell phones, and the other had to do with Facebook Live. They're sort of tied together, but not really. Maybe we'll tackle the cell phone issue first. I did see that there was a discussion about the use of electronic devices during city meetings. You presented it. Maybe talk about where this came from and why you presented it and what was the discussion and kind of where's that issue headed to?
Sure. Well, this the Facebook Live, now that our communication department is up and running and we're back on the Marshfield Media Access 989, 990, and 991, we're back hooked up to Charter and everything is running very smooth now. Now the next thing is, how do we get out to more people? Because not everybody has Charter. Many people just have their cell phones or their computers, and so the next level then would be to get on Facebook Live, so that people maybe they can't make the meeting can at least see what's taking place. And so we wanted to get that input, and our Tom Locke's communication director was ready to go with it. Alderman Witzel asked that it be pulled off last meeting, simply because we wanted to get, before we get the Facebook Live up and running, the concern was from a couple of aldermen are people using their cell phones during council meetings or being on their computer on say Facebook or something like that. So there was a good discussion, and realistically, being on a electronic device or a website other than what is going on at the council is a concern. So the concern that some of the aldermen have, and I share it, is if a council meeting is on Facebook Live and then somebody from the outside instant messages a alderman and giving them input, technically that's an open record, and that discussion needs to be aired. So you run into some real issues there. Along with this, back in Madison and other areas, they've had issues where aldermen were communicating back and forth during council meetings trying to sway votes and things like this. So the league has really frowned on anybody using any devices or anything. My position is on this, I mean, I value the league and I see the whole thing that they had down in Madison. My experience is that I believe both myself and all of the aldermen should have 100% focus on what is taking place at the meeting, listening to the presenter or listening to their fellow aldermen discussing the points that are being discussed. So I believe that if they're on a different website or going back and forth on their phone, it's it can be considered disrespectful to other people. I believe we should have 100% attention. And it seems like that's the way that the council really wants to go. So Steve and staff was tasked with coming up with, that we don't know if it's going to be ordinance or what it is, because how do you penalize that? And then once I believe that was discussed with the aldermen, then it was, then we went to the Facebook issue. And the Facebook issue I thought was very interesting. Mr. Witzel did make a motion to go ahead with it, and we finally did, but there were some aldermen that were, I don't want to say they were opposed, but I don't know, probably opposed because of the way they feel about social media. And of course, they have their right to that, but realistically speaking, we need to be able to communicate with as many people as they can, and just because maybe a couple of aldermen don't have social media, they choose not to, doesn't mean that the rest of the people out there don't experience communication in that way. So I was happy that got passed, and I believe at the next meeting we'll be on Facebook Live, and hopefully the next meeting we will have Steve and staff will have something good on those devices.
Yeah, let me add to that if I can. First of all, on the use of electronic devices, the whole cell phone thing, it's really three-pronged, and I've talked to the league about this at some length. and talk to the city attorney and others. The first one, obviously, the legal issue with council talking to each other via text or whatever during the meeting. That's what Madison did. They got in big trouble for it. You're directly usurping what an open meeting is supposed to be at that point. Then there's a second level where they're communicating with people outside of the building, perhaps. And you can say, well, is that a violation of the open meetings law? Well, it violates the spirit of the open meetings law for people to be giving input into decisions when they're not coming to the room and going to the podium and these kind of things. Then the third level, though, I think one of the ones that Bob and I have talked about a lot is just the perception. I mean, a person takes time out of their day, they come to a meeting, they go to the podium, and they look at if half the body, and I'm just making this up, is doing this. It's like, are you listening to my concerns? And you may be, but it doesn't give that impression. So I like where they're going. I like the idea of trying to trim that. I'll be honest, I've said this to the council and the mayor before. There have been a couple times during the meeting when I've said to my wife, Denise, I'm going to be home late, don't wait up for me or whatever. But for the most part, I mean, there's no reason we need to be on these devices during meetings, and I don't think it's appropriate. On the Facebook Live thing, I'll kind of echo what Bob said a minute ago about getting out the word to more people. My two sons are 30 and 26, and they don't live in the city of Marshfield. But if they did, I guarantee you they would not be watching cable TV. They just wouldn't. So they wouldn't see on 991 the live broadcast. But they might very well see it on Facebook. And we talk a lot here about trying to attract more people and new demographics. And I get the concern. There's some people on council who have a negative view of Facebook and other social media. And admittedly, there's posts going on while we're sitting here that aren't very desirable. There's comments being made that are rude and crude sometimes. But it is another method of engaging with the people, and that's what we're supposed to be about here. So I'm glad we're doing this 90-day test. I trust that when we get into the fall that the council will think it was a good thing and that we'll continue it, but we'll certainly evaluate the success or lack thereof at that time.
So, Mayor, it would be a live, sort of, I guess you could use the word broadcast, right? Facebook Live, straight to Facebook as the meeting is happening, just as you would see it on Marshfield Media Access?
Yes, it would. And the only thing is, during the meeting itself, the comments section would be turned off. So, so it would be a live broadcast of a meeting, just like what we currently do on cable. That is a live broadcast. This would be a live broadcast. And then right after that, once the live broadcast is over, then we would post that entire meeting to the city Facebook page so that people can go through. And then if they have comments that they want to put on, they absolutely can. Just not during the meeting itself.
Okay. As far as this, I want to go back to the cell phone thing for a second, and maybe Steve, you can clarify, but I'm wondering, is it okay is there any case where it's okay for aldermen to, or even with this Facebook Live thing, is there any instance where it is okay for them to receive a message of any kind as long as they were to read it out loud and make it part of the quote-unquote public record? What if one of the aldermen gets an instant message or a text message and now chimes in and says, oh, by the way, I just got this message from so-and-so who lives at this address, and he or she says this, and here's their comment and their question or something. Is there any case or any scenario where that's an okay thing right now?
Well, I think that may help get around the problem of being viewed as violating the spirit maybe of open meetings. But the problem is, what if somebody on the council or the mayor would like to ask that person to go to the podium and say, ma'am, you say that we shouldn't approve this permit because of the traffic. Can you answer a couple questions? Are you seeing more traffic now? There's no one to talk to. So we're not in a courtroom, but it does take away that personal touch of people being able to elaborate and be questioned on the things that they raise.
That's a good point. Okay. So that's again coming back. That would be a policy, not an ordinance per se. I don't know how you send an ordinance. You're talking ordinance officer then at that point or something, right?
Yeah, right. No, I'm pretty certain it would be a policy. The city attorney and I have not talked about this. The concern is going to be holding the body to that because, again, historically when you have policies, elected officials might say, well, I'm responsible to the voters. I'm not responsible to all these other things. But if the body adopts a policy, we should be able to call the body on their own policy. And what the penalties are, I guess, are yet to be determined. but, you know, they're under the rules that they set for themselves.
Okay, was there anything else on those topics before we moved on to something else? Anything else?
No, you know, the one thing that you said about if they are, you know, if something is being discussed on Facebook and then the alderman does come and say, this person said this is their comment. Steve brought up a very good point of, you know, they're not there to able to do this, but the other thing is any comments really should be in the very beginning under the public comments section.
Yeah.
So,
point.
you know, how would you, if we start opening up every individual thing that people to come to these meetings could take much longer than they are. So there's really, you know, we try to keep it as efficient as possible. But the overlying thing here is we want to get more communication out to the public, and this is just another format to do it.
Well, and plus, I guess then, you're right, that wouldn't fit under, you know, what is traditionally, you know, referred to as parliamentary procedure. That's not how you run the meetings. So, you know, somebody couldn't stand up who is at the council meeting and comment, just as somebody, you know, who's
Right.
at home texting or messaging. They're not supposed to, that doesn't fit under the rules that the meeting is run under anyway.
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
Right, and there's plenty of avenues for those folks to weigh in apart from that. We always encourage emails, calls to the council. If I get an email on a topic that's going to be on the council agenda for July 23rd, you'll see it in your packet. You'll actually see a copy of that. I may black out the your email address and stuff because we don't want to be giving personal data in a public document. But if it says, you know, I'm concerned about the traffic on Maple Avenue and you shouldn't approve this permit, they're going to get it in advance, so they have a chance to prepare for that. Input that comes at the meeting really ought to come from people who are at the meeting so they can, like I said, answer questions or elaborate on their concern more publicly.
All right, I saw most of the meeting. I didn't see all of it, but there was a lot of, I mean, it was the Ron Allman show.
Right.
Other than, you know, the
Yeah.
Facebook and the cell phone thing. Were there any highlights out of those things, Mayor, for you in terms of, I know they've been working on this comprehensive 5-year financial plan. There was some borrowing, there were some budget resolutions. But it's sort of like, you look at this agenda and you tie them all together and you go, boy, it really looks like the city is getting their financial house in order, so to speak.
Yes, I was very happy with it, and it was a long presentation. I mean, it was probably 45 minutes, and it was very detailed with Ellers and with Ron, and Ron just did an outstanding job. And the biggest thing that they said is, you know, we had our issues before with how it is, and I think that's, for the most part, what we realized is the way things were going were not the correct way. Now I'm very confident with Ron and with Ellers, the way they have this set up, that, as they put it, there is light at the end of the tunnel. What we see, and so this, by doing this, we refinance some things to save a pretty fair amount of money. Interest rates right now are incredibly low. So that is very, very helpful to us. That'll help us for next year. And what we're all trying to do is get prepared for next year's budget because we know we've got to fill a big hole there. Overall, you know, when they said there's light at the end of the tunnel, it was very good. It's very nice to see that our debt has come down, which is very, very good. And now with these lower interest rates, I believe that's going to help as well. So, you know, the city, we're in an interesting spot because we've had this setback, but that doesn't mean that you can't continue to progress. So we can't just go in, we can't be, okay, let's just respond to this fire.
Yeah.
Instead, what we're doing is, it's a 5-year plan, and there's going to be ups and there's going to be downs, and I believe that they have those factored in.
They do.
So I will tell you through this whole thing that we've been dealing with now, I believe, since February or something like that. Steve Barg, the city administrator, and Ron, the finance director, have done an amazing job. I mean, the hours that have gone into this and the depth that they have gone into have completely changed the landscape of our financial picture. And what was very nice, and even what they said the other day, David from Ellers, is the system is there now, so we can plug whoever in,
Yeah.
and the system will take over itself. That's very important. So Ron continues to work on, cost-saving measures and inefficiencies and whatnot, and we're going to see the benefits of those. So when we get to the budget, nobody can give me a number. Everybody's hesitant to, and of course because they don't have the numbers to give yet. So they still. I come in. When I do come in, I always go in jokingly to Steve and Ron. Hey, did you guys find any money? Did you put your hand in the sofa, find something? And I believe that they have found everything, and I'm very optimistic about it.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that, and I feel the same way. When we realize what we're facing in terms of a structural budget shortfall, immediately you take a deep breath and say, oh my gosh. And everybody, whether you're at your workplace or at home, you want that silver bullet. If we just do this one thing, we can get out of it. And there never was a silver bullet for this. But what you saw on Tuesday night was a couple more pieces of the pie. Refinancing old debt to get better interest rates, packaging it up, and in some cases, extending the term. You might say to yourself, well, wait a minute now, hold on. Extending the term, that sounds a little like moving shells around, I'd rather have a 15-year home mortgage than a 30-year, right? Because I'm going to pay less interest over the term. But we were doing, in many cases, 10-year notes, and I know why we were doing them, but we were kind of choking ourselves in the sense that we were doing 10-year notes in some cases on improvements that were going to last for 30, 40, 50 years. And that's normally not what cities do. They match it up to the new people coming in, the new people building, so we're all paying our fair share, that kind of thing. So restructuring the debt and reaping some refinancing is part of the puzzle, along with all the other things that are going on, which is, looking at everything we can cut, overtime, purchases that maybe can be delayed. Do we really need to refill that position with another full-time position? All those things are going on. At the same time, we're looking at possible revenues, not trying to repackage a tax into something phony, but are there opportunities we have to fill the gap? It's a multi-phase operation, and I really do see it coming together. The council will get a first preliminary look at the 2020 budget on August 27th. At that time, they'll see what it would be if we did basically this year's government at next year's prices, and that'll give us an idea of, do we have more room for other things that we can add that the other departments would like to see? Or do we have to even cut more? I don't know. I'm hoping not. But it's a process I think they're going to find to be very thoughtful in terms of moving the city forward, but recognizing that our citizens, are living on incomes that they need to make taxes work too. I think it's a very thoughtful approach, and Ron's been a huge part of it, as the mayor said.
And I will say I really appreciate the approach that Steve and Ron have taken with Ellers and with everybody's advice. The program that they did the other night, every council member got a full explanation. It was there crystal clear. But the other thing is that we did is, instead of taking this hole that we have and amortizing it out over 6 or 7 years to make today's hole a little smaller, instead what we did is we took care of the issue now. And I believe that is a great thing to do. And it is not something that I think a lot of places would have done, but I think it's the most responsible thing to do. And I really appreciate that they suggested that is the way to do it. Absorb it, take the hit, and now let's move ahead.
And I think that's going to play well with Moody's. There's concern among some staff people, and I'm sure among the mayor and council too, about will we see our AA3 bond rating fall? If your bond rating falls, you are going to have perhaps fewer bidders on your bonds, and you're going to have higher interest that you have to pay because you're not seen as desirable as a bond issuer. But Moody's, I've been in conferences with them for 20 years, as a city administrator in 3 different cities, 20 plus years. They listen to your story. They want to hear your story. And if your story starts out with, here's the deal, we had a problem, we faced it head on, this makes these numbers look worse than you might think, but here's what we're doing. Here's why it's really not quite as bad as it looks. Here's what we're putting in place for the future. They will listen to the whole story. And I think that we have a feeling that there's a good chance that Moody's might even look at this and say, you're on the right track. You've got your house going in the right direction, and that bond rating may stay, despite the fact that the general fund unreserves that are spendable, per se, has dropped. And the other great thing is, as was reported at length the other night, are the tax increment districts. They are doing very well, and a couple of them may close early, especially the business park, which is just going wonderfully. So it's not as if the TIF districts themselves are in terrible positions where they're not going to make it. They're going to be a boost for us. So as they get more money coming in, we'll be able to pay those off and close those early, get those properties back on the tax roll, see that number of general fund spendable reserves inch up every year.
You know, I remember when the city brought Dan Kneck on board from the private sector. I think it was Strand, and was there for many years, engineering projects and working on it from the private sector standpoint, and then came to the public sector side from the municipality side. And that seemed to have an impact on how business got done now all of a sudden in the Department of Public Works. And we've maybe seen the same thing now with Ron Aumann coming in from the private sector, where if you did have I call it a structural budget shortfall or whatever it is, they're going to say, we've got to stop the bleeding right now. We're a private entity or a private business, and we can't afford to be hemorrhaging for 15 or 30 years or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's sort of maybe where that mindset comes from. He has brought that now to the city of Marshfield. Is that, I don't know, that seems to be a good move for especially the city of Marshfield. Bring in somebody from the private sector with that private sector mentality and applying it to the public sector. In this case, it seems to be working very well.
A while ago, it's one of the things I ran on is bringing parts of business to government. Government runs a certain way. And I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's what you're seeing now is this, and it's very fun to be a part of it and to watch it take place, because you're exactly right. We brought somebody in from the public, and to see it mold together, because there's some great things about how government runs. There really are. You can look at it all around the city. There's some great things about there, but there's also some great things about the private sector. And man, when you can mold them together and go, because there's been things that I've run up to Steve that I really think would work great. And then Steve educates me on that wouldn't work because of this or whatever. Okay, now I get it. And there's other things that we've implemented, like with the roads and getting more money there. That wasn't received very well, and then it was implemented, and we saved a lot of money. So when you see this integration, I believe it's very good. But I do want to reiterate, it's not that business is perfect and government is not. There are some great things about the way governments run. Police departments are not profit centers. Other things, streets is not a profit center. So it can't be driven for profit, but it can be driven for it can be driven for efficiency. Even though our street department dean is doing a great job, there are just some things there that I believe it's going to continue to get better and better and better. Just the other night, it seems like our finances are really in a good place.
Well, yeah, you mentioned you're right, not profit center, not making money, but not losing money either.
Right.
True.
And so
True.
Steve, can
True.
you speak to that? Because you've been in the public sector for a long
Yeah.
time, and I've seen other cases of where people have brought that private sector mentality, and I'm sure it's worked very well. And that just seems to be, especially in Marshfield's case now, a win-win in cases like Dan Kneck we mentioned, and now with Ron Aumann bringing those private sector experiences to the public sector and to the municipality level.
Yeah, I would add Jennifer Rakew, our Human Resources Director, to that list. I think sometimes public sector employers like local governments, when they see applications come in for a job, they, in their mind, look at it and say, well, I give preference to this one over this one because this person's been working in the public sector. He or she knows what we do. And there's something to be said about that. But I think sometimes we turn away good people because we are concerned with the learning curve. Well, if you're going to hire somebody, you're thinking about them for a long-term employment. You're hoping they'll be there for 15, 20 years. You don't know. But you have to get over that learning curve thing. The first 3 or 4 months with a person like Ron Aumann or Dan Kneck when he first came here might be a little steep. yeah, Ron, I know that you'd like to do this, but in the public sector accounting world, we can't use that fund for this purpose. But if you shy away from hiring somebody because there's a learning curve, you're really being very short-sighted. And I totally agree with what Bob said. You know, not everything that's done in the business sector can be done here. Government's kind of clunky. In business, the CEO can write a memo today saying, we are doing this starting tomorrow. Well, we have public hearings and second readings of ordinances. It's meant to give the public a chance to weigh in and not wake up one day and find out that everything in their community has changed. But there are a lot of things from the business sector, the private and nonprofit sector, that we can incorporate here, and we need more people like Dan, Ron, and Jen.
And I will tell you, Jen is a great example, Dan and Ron. And we just had just before this press conference, we had a meeting where we were going over with customer service with many people in the city staff, and all people will go through this. But I have to tell you, because we mentioned 3 by name, this is not one of the things that before I ran for mayor, I never even knew that this was in the threshold or that I would feel this way. I will tell you what, the amount of pride that I have for all of our city employees and what they do, and we've mentioned 3 or 4, with all of what they do, I wish that, my hope is that other people within the city really know how lucky we are. This is a talented group of people, and they really care about their job. Because we're in government, we're subject to criticism, stuff like that, and the public has every right to do that. But I really did not know how proud I was going to. I didn't even know that fit the landscape. This is a talented group of people, and they give their all. And we've brought out 3 or 4 of them, which need the recognition. But I will tell you what, all of our different departments, wastewater, streets, the zoo, parks, everybody, they're a talented group of people. I really appreciate them.
And quite frankly, to add to that, we've had a lot of people here over the years that have won statewide recognition, wastewater for their phosphorus treatment, which Sam Warp has people contacting him saying, we'd like to look at that here because it would be more cost effective. How did you do that? There are various operations in the city where we've seen other people contacting us for help because they've heard that we've had some successful approaches.
Was there anything from closed session on Tuesday
Well,
night?
Yeah, there's not really much I can talk about. There's discussion of possibly some redevelopment that may come to light here soon, but there's nothing I can really put out there. I thought there was one other item I was going to touch on. Can I touch on for the public safety thing for a minute?
Public safety.
Yeah, under staff updates.
Let me get to that.
Very beginning of the meeting.
So public safety. Oh, public safety upgrades?
Yeah, I just want to highlight this. Chris Jokic had asked that this be put on an agenda for an update. You remember a year ago we talked about the areas where we were deficient in terms of communicating. So let's say there's an officer on the northwest part of town where the communication has been a little rocky, or they're in Menards or Walmart or the high school and they're trying to contact their fellow officers and the dispatcher and they're not getting out clearly. A number of things were identified. A lot of the focus was initially on portable radio replacement, which we've done now for both the fire and police, and also on these towers to try and improve the communication from these rough areas of town. And so the chief reported that the portables have made some impact. It's good that we're doing the towers because the portables weren't the savior. They certainly gave some improvement. But with these towers that are going up now, the combination of the two, and we want to follow up on this. I want to follow up on it later in the year and see, are you able to now communicate effectively between the dispatch center and the officers and between the officers and one another? Because, we provide a lot of important services here. But fire and police are often rightly considered to be near the top. And people want to know, if my son is in Menards and he's having a heart attack and there's somebody there that comes and they're asking for backup, can we get through? And I want people to know that we're working on these things. They're improving. And we're addressing the public safety concerns that people in our community might have. And that they should know that they're well taken care of. There's people every day. I see emails almost every week about how's the portables doing? When are the towers going to be installed? We want to get this up and running. I just want you to know that there's people who work really hard to make those improvements for the public.
That's all I got.
very good.
All right, thank
Excellent.
you.
Thanks, Mike.